Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's a new week. It's a shorter week. We will not meet on Thursday and Friday. For those of us in the U.S., we'll be celebrating Thanksgiving, and then I guess some might celebrate Black Friday, although it's kind of Black Friday month or quarter these days, isn't it? Anyway, we're here today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, Lord willing, and we are looking at Matthew chapter 16. And what I tried to do on Thursday was tie us to the text to see what is here. And I challenged some assumptions. And I was impressed by some of the things that y'all were saying. And I can't remember if it was Christian. I think it was Christian that made a comment that you may say, hey, you dissed that on Thursday. Well, I didn't intend to do that. We'll see. I can't remember exactly what I said or how it went, but at any rate, let's look at this text. This is one of the more controversial texts because of the implications that it has had in church history. I still want to keep it here to the text, and then we can talk about the implications here in a moment. So this is Matthew 16. We'll back up to verse 13 to get started here. And Jesus, having come to the parts of Caesarea Philippi, was asking his disciples, who do men say that I am? I, the Son of Man. Who do they say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some John the Immerser, others Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. He says to them, and you, who do you say I am? And Simon Peter, answering, said, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answering said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal it to you, but my Father who is in the heavens. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my assembly, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. And I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of the heavens, and whatever you may bind on the earth will having been bound in the heavens, and whatever you may loose on the earth will be having been loosed in the heavens. All right. So we went over some of this. Just to recap, Jesus asked the disciples, what are you hearing out there? What are people saying about me? And it seems like for most of the Jews, the one conclusion they would not come to is that Jesus is the Son of David, the coming Messiah King, that kind of thing. But they couldn't deny his work, so they said, you're Elijah or one of the prophets or John the Baptist resurrected, that kind of thing. And then Jesus says, well, who do you guys, you 12, who do you say that you are, that I am? And immediately Peter, or Simon Peter, affirms, you are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God. You are the promised one. You are David's heir who will take the throne. Right? This is a profound statement of faith. Simon Peter is convinced of who Jesus is. Jesus says, you're blessed. Human knowledge didn't open your eyes to this. Even your own intuition, your flesh and blood, you didn't either. But my Father who is in the heavens opened your eyes to see this. All right, so then he says this, and this is the hard part. I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my assembly, usually translated church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. All right, so let's pick up kind of where we left off on Thursday. So I pointed out to you that when he says, like in verse 19, I will give to you the keys of the kingdom, that's talking about Peter. That's a singular you. This doesn't come across in English as well, but in the Greek it is a singular you pointing back to Peter. Let's talk about the name Peter and the rock. So, do you remember what Peter's other name is? You know this, right? What's the other name? So he was named Simon by his father, presumably. His father is Jonah or John, Bar Jonah, but John. What's his other name that he's referred to? Actually, it's the name that Paul refers to him as almost exclusively in the epistles. I think, I may be mistaken, but I think he only refers to him as Peter once, at least in the in most Greek manuscripts. In the TR, he calls him Peter a few more times, but I think in the Nessie Allen text, the older text, it's almost always Cephas. Yeah, so Simon or Simeon is his given name, but here's what happens at the very beginning. Now, let me back up 1 second. You know how I'm a stickler for the text and the context and staying right here. In this situation, I'm going to bring in some other sources, so to speak, that I think help explain what's going on here. But I still want to warn you and warn myself to not be overly confident about going outside the text, and also just have some nuance and some care, and watch out for assumptions. All right. So having said that, at the beginning of Jesus's ministry, so to speak, in John's gospel, when Peter and his brother are found, in fact, they come to Jesus, and here's what Jesus says. This is John 1:42. Sana's got the screaming goat. Yeah, very good. So is there. That's great. Having brought him to Jesus, having looked on him, Jesus says, "You are Simon, the son of Joseph. You will be called Cephas." And John tells us what Cephas means. It means a rock. So his name is Simon. Jesus says you're going to be called Cephas. Cephas is an Aramaic word. It's Aramaic for rock. It wasn't a popular name as far as I can tell. It's simply the word for rock or bedrock. It's a large rock upon which you might build a building. So here it is at the beginning, Jesus calling his apostles in John's gospel, and he looks at this one. He says, "You're Simon." Right? That's your name. Your father Jonah gave you this name, Simon. You will be called Rock. And John wants to make sure we understand that's what the word means. This comes up again in Acts. This is Acts 10:5. Now send men to Joppa and send for a certain one, Simon. Now the tanner was also called Simon, so he had to explain what it means, that who is surnamed Peter, and that's Petros. Okay, so Jesus says your name, Simon, will be called Rock. Or Cephas in Aramaic. In the Greek language, Daniel says, should be careful in saying a bedrock since Jesus is the cornerstone. No, I don't think so. We'll come back to that maybe in a little bit. If I don't answer that by the end, bring it up again. And I'll explain why. Okay, so what was I saying? So if Jesus is speaking Aramaic to the apostles in Matthew 16, which he might have been, if that were the case, then he would say to Peter, I also say to you that you are Cephas, and on this Cephas I will build my assembly. In Aramaic, these two words would be the same. So he might have done that. He might have said, I say to you that you are Cephas. Just like I told you, you will be called Cephas. You will be called rock. You are rock. And on this rock, I will build my assembly. If he did speak in Aramaic here, Matthew, writing in Greek, would have had to make a change because this word rock is the word Petra. Petra is feminine. It's a feminine word. In the Greek language, they never assigned a feminine word to a male. So that to call Simon rock in Greek, he couldn't call him Petra because he's a man. So he had to change it to Petros to call Simon rock in Greek. Does that make sense? Are you tracking with me? So this doesn't require that Jesus spoke in Aramaic. It would still be the same, but I think it's at least possible, if not likely, that Jesus would have spoken in Aramaic. In which case, you are rock, just like I said you would be. On this rock, and we'll talk about what that means here in a minute, I will build my assembly. Either way, the point is that Petros, which is translated Peter, was not a common name. It's a forced change of Petra to fit a male if you're going to call him by this nickname or surname. If you're going to call this guy Rock in Greek, you can't call him Petra because that's not how language works. You have to call him Petros. Does that make sense? I'm not drawing conclusions yet. Are you at least understanding that grammatical point? That's why here in English, we have Peter and rock, even though they are two forms of the same word. English is like Aramaic in this sense. He could have translated, I say to you that you are rock, and on this rock I will build my assembly. That works in English and in Aramaic. In Greek, this first rock has to be changed to a masculine name, a noun, Petros. The second one stays in its normal form of Petra. Okay? Hopefully I'll make some sense of it for you in a moment, but I want to get some of these details down. Okay, now let me take your mind a different direction. What is that? Do you know what that is? Those of you who are listening via podcast later, I will explain to you what I just put up on the screen for everybody. Do y'all know what that is? Or where that is, or both? I'm sure you do. I'm sure somebody does. It is a massive rock that has carved into it pillars. William David says Israel. Nope, close. It has, yeah, there you go, Darren. And Daniel. Yes. This is the famous place called Petra that was the opening in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, as they found their way in, and then Indy made himself to the location of Joseph of Arimathea and so on, right? Amy will come back to that. I'll try to remember to come back to that. All right, so this is a location in Jordan called Petra. Rock. Right? Massive bedrock kind of setting. And here they actually carved into it, again, pillars and a, what would you call that, sort of a facade that looks like a building, and then you can actually go inside. Hang on, Amy. Petra is not actually the gates of Hades, but it's close. All right, so I just put that up there. That appears to be, so I think it was Christian, maybe it was Stephen. Somebody brought up last week, Thursday, that Caesarea Philippi is the place at the near the base of Mount Hermon. And I pushed a little on that to say, well, there's no Mount Hermon here, right? And I was curious to see if you would push back on me a little bit. Caesarea Philippi is where Mount Hermon is. And it has significance that we'll talk about in a moment. And it had lots of rock cliffs like Petra that I just put up there for you. So when Jesus says Petra, in that setting, it would not be, oh, is this what you're getting at, Amy? Pebbles? Yeah, it would not be small stones, pebbles, that kind of thing. It would be these huge stone cliffs like what I just put up there, the Petra. And for those of you listening, you can either come back and watch the video, or you could just look up Petra in Jordan and look at some of the pictures there to see what I'm talking about. These are, massive stone cliffs. What I think Jesus is doing here is he has brought his apostles, his disciples, to this area in Caesarea Philippi. I keep putting the emphasis on a different syllable, Philippi. And with these huge stone cliffs near Mount Hermon, when Peter says, "You are the Christ," Jesus says, "You are blessed." He says, "I say to you, you are rock. And on this rock, I will build my assembly." Not talking just about Peter, but again, in that setting, everybody would have associated the idea of rock that he just called Peter with these rock structures that are nearby, and understood Jesus saying, right here where we are, you see these big rocks? Peter, you just made this great assertion, which is true, and it's what I've been trying to convince people of this whole time. I'm going to build my assembly. Remember, this is ecclesia, or ecclesia. This is not church. That comes from a totally different Greek word. We've talked about it. That's I wish they would just translate it called out ones or assembly instead of church. But I'm going to build my assembly, just like in the Old Covenant, when the Jews would come to a mount like Mount Hermon or Mount Sinai or Hebron and assemble before the Lord. They were called out to assemble before the Lord. Jesus says, I have an assembly. I'm calling out my people to assemble at the foot of a mountain. But of course, we know he doesn't actually mean that kind of assembly. That's all sort of word pictures, metaphors for him to build his people. But he's using all this metaphorical language to say, I'm going to build it. Tracking with that? So here's what I think is going on with Peter. He does call Peter rock, Petros. He's already said, like we saw in John 1, he's already said he's going to call him rock. So now he does it because Jesus is thrilled with Peter's confession, with his assertion, yes, with his statement of belief, you are the Christ. He says, Simon, you didn't come up with this on your own. My Father in the heavens revealed it to you. And I say to you, you are rock. And on this rock, but also look at, the rock that we're standing on, or the rock that's right over there, I'll build my assembly. I think he's referring metaphorically to Peter and his confession in the setting where there's a big rock that would have been an obvious basis for building a structure or a foundation. I think the disciples would have understood this completely. I don't think they would have started wondering, is he saying he's going to build his whole church on Peter and only Peter, and that eventually Peter's going to be the Pope, something like that? I don't think they would have gotten there. I think in that setting, they would have been like, I get it. Peter made this great confession, this great assertion of who Jesus is, and Jesus says, yes, I am the Christ. I am the Son of God, meaning the Messiah, and I'm going to build my assembly on that assertion, on those who believe that and obey me as their king. So I'm stressing this because this whole verse has been set in a theological setting, structure, where the debate is Peter the first pope or all this? And I think if you place yourself in the setting, it would have made perfect sense. Jesus is very pleased with Peter acknowledging he is the Christ. And he's telling them, I'm going to build my church on you, but probably more so on what you've said and what you believe, because that's the foundation. Now, getting back to Daniel's question about should we not use bedrock, remember Ephesians 2:20 and other places, right? The church is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. Christ is the cornerstone, but the rest of the foundation are the apostles and prophets. Apostles plural. So yeah, he points out Peter here, but Peter is one of them who forms the foundation of the building built on this bedrock that Jesus is pointing to here. All right, so I know some of you are bringing up other things. Is everybody catching what I'm saying? Doesn't mean you agree with me, but are you tracking with what I'm getting at? Amy says following, so it's not pebble and rock, because I've heard the argument that Peter is pebble. Nope, no pebbles here. The Petra would be a massive rock structure, not a pebble. Dale says there's a grotto there. Yeah, we'll come to that. Hold on. Streaming to Mount Zion. Yeah, he doesn't say that here, but I think that's the idea. Yeah, very good, Daniel. Most miss something bigger. Jesus is showing us he is God here, riding on a rock, just as God did, foreshadowed on Mount Sinai. Yeah, I'm not persuaded that's true, but maybe. Darren says a moment of clarity for the disciples for sure. Yep, Daniel, I think you're right about the arguing there. Very good. Isn't Rome the fourth beast? Yes. Maybe we'll touch on that here in a minute, although I'm running out of time. We may have to save it for tomorrow. Daniel says, okay, I agree based on your clarification. Everyone's tracking. Heiser takes the same idea, does he? Okay, good. Mike says he agrees. Cool. All right, let me All right, let me go a little bit further, and then we'll save the keys of the kingdoms tomorrow. All right, so the other thing some of you have alluded to. So I say you are Peter upon this Petra. You are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my assembly. And then he says this, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. It's very important that you recognize the Greek word here is not hell. This is so often quoted, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. That is not what Jesus said. That's not what, let me just make sure that, that's not what any of the Greek manuscripts that I'm aware of, I don't think any of them say gates of hell. This is not Gehenna, it's Hades. Very important, because gates of hell makes you think of something completely different from what Jesus is saying. Remember what Hades was. Well, actually, I would say it still is. Hades is the Greek word for the Old Covenant Hebrew word, Sheol. It's the place of the dead. You died and went to Hades. Your body went in the grave. Your spirit, soul, inner man, whatever you want to call it, went to Hades or Sheol. And it was locked up there until Jesus came. We saw this in the Revelation series, till Jesus, who had the keys of death and Hades, came and released at least some of the people out of Hades. And then we saw in Revelation 20, the great white throne judgment, then eventually everybody will come out of Hades and be judged. But some were released from Hades in the first century. Jesus says, I'm going to build my assembly, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Now, somebody already mentioned this, brought this up. I grabbed this off the internet, and it's always dangerous, but this, I believe, is a modern day picture of what the Greeks and Romans referred to as the gates of Hades. This is a cave opening that went so deep that the Greeks and Romans said this is the entrance to Hades. Guess where this is located? Caesarea Philippi. Very near where they would have been at the base of Mount Hermon. So, what I think is happening, and I qualify, I think, because I am going outside the scripture to draw this together, but I agree with the statements that are being made here. He has this conversation with his disciples for a reason at this location. If they're there near these massive Petra stone structures or cliffs, and right over there is what everybody, pagans, Roman Empire, everybody called the gates of Hades. It's just the perfect place and setting to say to his men, I am the Messiah. I am the Christ. Peter, you said it right. You are rock. And on this rock, I'm going to construct my assembly, my building, my ecclesia. And that gates of Hades over there, where all the people, that's where all the dead people are down that hole. Imagine there being gates there at the entrance of the cave. What do gates do? Well, they keep people in and keep enemies out, right? They will not, those gates, they will not prevail against my ecclesia. I will burst through those gates and go rescue my people out of Hades, which is exactly what happened in the first century. We saw this in Revelation in our 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 study. I think Jesus is telling these disciples ahead of time, this is what's coming. And if I'm correct about the rest of what we looked at in Revelation and 1 Thessalonians and 1 Corinthians, then from around 70 AD onward, he has continued to build his assembly both here on earth, but then taking his saints to him at death. But I think those who are in Hades in Jesus' day are the ones he's talking about that he's going to rescue. All right, so to put it very simply, in that setting, all around, I believe Jesus is saying, Peter, you made the right statement of belief. I am the Christ. You are a rock. On the rock that you are, and based on what you've said, I'm going to build my assembly here, and the place where the dead are currently locked up, they are not going to stay locked. I'm going to deliver them out of Hades into the heavens. Is everybody tracking with that? Does that make sense of what we see here? Amy says, following, I also see it as a double meaning, which seems played out in Acts and letters. I know you made that comment a little earlier. Which double meaning are you thinking of, Amy? Daniel says, gates of the land of the dead before Christ's resurrection, that is where they would all go, but after his resurrection, they who died in faith would rise with him. Yep, very good. Which fits well with Thessalonians, indeed. Sana says, makes sense. Not your understanding. Yep. Darren says, good to go. Daniel says, dang, time just passed so fast. I don't want this lesson to end. Yeah, well, we'll come back. There's more good stuff here tomorrow. All right, so that's what I think's going on. And then the keys of the kingdom, if you want to look ahead a little bit, read Isaiah 22. In not the Septuagint, but in a normal English translation of the Masoretic text, and see if you can discern a little bit about what Jesus means with the keys of the kingdom kind of thing. Amy says, the entrance power of death will not be able to stand against my assembly who overcome. Yeah, I think kind of two sides of the same coin, maybe. Yeah. Jim says, wow, Doug, this is eye-opening. Oh, good. Thank you. That's helpful to just know that it's connecting, that you're seeing what's there. Now, as I wrap up, just if I have persuaded you or you were already persuaded of this, just take a moment and put yourself as one of these disciples. And just imagine what would be going on in your head to hear Jesus say this. I mean, this is the kind of thing that for me is just so dramatic. I would love to have been there. And this would have been a profound and wonderful statement in that setting. Now, they didn't completely get it, but we know the full story now, so we can get it. So anyway, put yourself, in your mind's eye, imagine being there once. Amy says, Peter opens the church to Jews and Samaritans. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to that tomorrow. All right, everybody, keep thinking, and we will look at the next section tomorrow. Grace and peace to you.